Chafe coming at you with the different Southern Paladin-esque angle. I can see why Palladium puts his phone like this, because there ain't really too many ways to point your phone in your car when you're trying not to point it at yourself. I want to talk about when we talk past each other. It seems like a very common thing that we do when we have discussions, especially when we have discussions where we disagree. I think they're called axioms or something like that, which an axiom defines your point of view, and your sort of foundation of thought, your foundation of understanding, the way that you understand a concept, the way that you understand certain issues within that concept. Let's just take a Democrat versus Republican, which is probably the most common one happening in this country today. When we argue, you can argue whatever you want. Pick your battle within the Democrat versus Republican arena. It can be abortion, it can be the border, it can be entitlements, it can be whatever, right? The way that the politicians play their games, and I'm talking politicians on both sides, where they vilify the other side and they justify their side. This is exactly why we can't come to an understanding. This is exactly why we can't this is why we can't work anything out. Because number one, we choose a side, and number two, we don't trust the other side. We don't trust the motives of the other side. We don't trust the sincerity of the other side. We don't trust the logic of the other side. We don't give the other side any credibility. And so when you hear something that the other side says and it kind of makes sense to you, you say to yourself, well, yeah, that what you just said rings true to me. However, I don't think you really mean that, because that sounds too good to me. And you, because you're on the wrong side, you're evil. I've already got it in my mind that you have no credibility. Therefore, everything you say, not based on what you say, but based on who says it, is not credible. So any so-called good points that you're going to bring up are thereby invalidated. And there's lots of ways that we do this. We engage in logical fallacies. We engage in sophistry. We engage in just straight up lies, made up statistics, whatever you want to say. And then human pride comes into it quite a bit too, right? The whole thing of when I'm in an argument with somebody and I'm clearly losing the argument, even in my own mind, I'm thinking, wow, I'm losing the argument. However, the last thing I'm going to do is concede to this fool. So I'm going to try to think of anything I can say to try to take his feet out from underneath him. Whether that means I'm going to deflect, whether that means I'm going to change the subject, whatever it is. But then you got the other side who is winning the argument, and what do they do when they win the argument, or when they're winning the argument, when they're clearly making good points? What do? They get arrogant, they get cocky, they it's like a boxer who's got the other guy on the ropes. What do they do when they got the other guy on the ropes? Do they lay off? No, they start throwing a barrage of punches once they got the other guy in the ropes. Because it's about winning. It's about winning for the guy who is winning, and it's about not losing for the guy who is losing. And unfortunately, also, your ability to debate, your ability to argue, your ability to make logical arguments, oftentimes that is what determines who wins the debate, who wins the argument. Not the person whose argument is actually based in truth. It's the person who is better at arguing who often wins. That shouldn't be, right? That shouldn't be. It should be the person who is actually on the side of truth who actually wins. But then again, I'm making an assumption that there is one person in that argument who has the unequivocal truth, which neither of them do. So nobody in an argument, no matter what side they're on, has the absolute truth. Nobody does. Both of those people have the wool pulled over their eyes to some extent or another, and they're both fools, including me, if I was arguing with somebody. So why do we engage in arguing at all, as opposed to discussing and actually trying to seek the truth? Why do we do this? I don't know. Maybe it's just about human nature. You know, we need to have an enemy. I think that's a huge part of it. But then you dive a little bit deeper in that concept. Why do we need to have an enemy? Why? If you're a Republican, why do you need to have the Democrat? If you're a Democrat, why do you need to have the Republican as an enemy? If you're a Yankees fan, why do you need the Boston Red Sox in your life? You need them because you need somebody to beat up on. Why? Why do you need somebody to beat up on? You abusive parents out there, why do you need a child to yell at and smack around for no good reason? I'm not saying that all yelling at kids is bad. I'm not saying that spanking is bad, but I'm saying for no good reason. You know, when your kid just walks through the door and you just feel like you had a shitty day at work and you feel like venting, and so you yell at your kid because you forgot to flush the toilet 3 days ago. He spilled a little bit of milk on the table and he didn't wipe it up. Or his shoes are untied. He walks through the door and his shoes are untied. And you go, tie your shoes, man! God! What's wrong with you? Can't you see your fucking shoes are untied? What are you, stupid? You're fucking 10 years old. You don't know how to tie your shoes? That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. You had a bad day at work, and now you're taking it out on a 10-year-old, or an 8-year-old, or a 15-year-old. Why do we need that enemy? Why do we need that person? I would argue that we need somebody to blame our problems on, other than ourselves. That's what I would argue. It's like misdirected disappointment, misdirected anger, misdirected frustration, misdirected failure, right? You're a failure. You are. I am. Yet, you're reveling in the failure of your enemies instead of looking in the mirror and recognizing your own failure. Looking in the mirror and saying, like, wow, I made a huge mistake when I said that or did that or whatever. I probably shouldn't have done that. I probably shouldn't have done that. fact, we tend to, when we do something where we, quote, get in trouble or we get in an altercation with another person, what is one of the main things that we tend to do after that? After that confrontation is over, we tend to call up our best friend and say, hey, listen, what happened? I said this, and then he said this, and then I said this back, and then he said this, and then I said fuck you, and I hung up on him. What do you think about that? Do you think that I was in the right? And if your friend, being a good friend in your mind, in your opinion, your friend would support you and go, yeah, man, you were right. Yeah, that's bullshit. How dare that person fucking talk to you like that? That's what we think a good friend is. Somebody who supports us even when we're wrong. That's what a so-called good friend does. But a real good friend would be like, well, to be honest with you, you probably shouldn't have worded it like that. I mean, I understand why you said it, but I don't think you should have said it like that because you probably didn't get the desired result. And you probably shouldn't have ended your conversation by hanging up on him and saying fuck you and hanging up on him. I mean, did that really help the situation when you did that? That's what a good friend does. A good friend holds a mirror up to you, but also supports you at the same time and says, look, I understand how you feel that way, and the other person was in the wrong for saying this, and this, but again, you know, what's the point of what you're doing? Is the point of what you're doing to just to get in a fight and get pissed off or piss the other person off, or is that the point, or was the point for you to try to reconcile with that person, try to get your point across in a loving way and get them to agree with you and to try to patch things up? What was the point? Because whatever the point was, did you achieve your goal? Did you convert the person from being a liberal to being a conservative? Is that what you did? Or did you at least get them to think a little bit about what you were saying? Get them to reflect a little bit on what you're talking about, get them to question things? Or did you just stand up there, take your gloves off, and just start throwing punches until you drew blood because you wanted to look good in front of everybody else? Or you wanted to feel powerful? Because if that's what the point of the whole thing was, then you probably were successful in achieving that, because that's all that happened. You sounded really good when you made that argument. You punched him in the mouth, you knocked the tooth out, he's bloody and he's laying there, and everybody laughed at him and said, ha, look what you did to him. And then you flexed your muscles and made a big smile and walked away, and you said, I win. But really, did you change the world? No. What you did to that person was you made them say, oh, I ain't gonna let that happen to me again. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna dig my heels in deeper into my ideology, and I'm gonna come back next time when I argue with this person, and I'm gonna know what I'm talking about more, and I'm gonna have my talking points more laid out, and I'm gonna have my argument more logically laid out in front of me, and I'm gonna beat them next time. You actually changed that person for the worse. That's what you did. You know, it's like those people who go to jail and they become worse people in jail. They don't get rehabilitated. They become bigger assholes than they were when they went in. They become harder. They become tougher. They become meaner when they go to jail. So what's the point? What's the point of jail? I mean, some people say the point of jail is just to get those people out of society. Just take them out of circulation. Put them in a cage. Keep them away from me and my kids. That's really what jail does, as far as I'm concerned. But, you know, it doesn't rehabilitate. Most of the time, it doesn't. What's your point when you're arguing with people? What are you trying to do? Trying to win? You're trying to win hearts and minds. What are you trying to do?